The courtroom was small and plain, with wooden benches that creaked every time someone moved. A slow ceiling fan spun overhead, barely pushing the heavy summer air. The walls were bare except for a faded painting of the American flag and a clock that ticked too loud. It wasn't a place where big stories usually happened, but today felt different. People from the town had packed the room, filling every seat. Some stood along the walls. Their eyes moved between a tall, fancy-looking woman in a navy blue suit and a quiet couple sitting across from her. The woman, Linda, wore heels that clicked sharply against the floor. Her jewelry sparkled like it didn't belong in a room so simple. The couple, Maya and her husband Tom, wore worn-out clothes. Tom's hands were rough and dirty, like he had come straight from the fields. Maya's face looked tired, but strong. She sat with her hands folded, eyes focused ahead. People whispered. They knew Linda was rich and powerful. They also knew Maya and Tom were just farmers trying to hold on to what little they had. No one said it out loud, but it felt like the fight was already unfair. Something was coming. Linda was the kind of woman everyone noticed the moment she walked into a room. Her clothes were expensive and perfectly pressed, her hair styled just right. She carried herself like she owned the world, or at least this little town. People knew she ran a chain of stores and had money to back it all up. But behind her sharp smile was a coldness that made people uneasy. She didn't like being challenged, especially by those she saw as beneath her. Maya, on the other hand, was the opposite. She wore a faded dress that had seen many seasons and a pair of old boots that had been repaired more times than anyone could count. Her hands were calloused from years of working the land. Despite everything, she had a quiet strength in her eyes. She was the kind of person who didn't say much but spoke with her heart. Tom, her husband, sat beside her, his face heavy with worry. His broad shoulders seemed to carry the weight of their struggles. He rarely spoke, but everyone knew he stood firmly behind Maya. The problem was a piece of land, a small patch bordering Linda's property. Linda claimed the couple had crossed over and started farming her land without permission. She said they owed her money for the crops they had harvested. But Maya and Tom insisted the land belonged to them, passed down in a promise from Linda's late father. The courtroom was ready to hear both sides. Everyone waited for the truth, though many feared it might be buried beneath money and power. The tension was thick, like a storm about to break. Just as the judge took his seat, the courtroom grew silent. The heavy wooden door creaked open, and everyone's attention turned to Linda. She leaned toward one of her lawyers and spoke quietly, but loud enough for a few people nearby to hear. "Look at her," Linda whispered, nodding toward Maya. "She smells like the dirt she works in, and those hands, like she's never known a bath." A hush fell over the room. The words were sharp and cruel, cutting through the quiet like a knife. Maya felt the sting but kept her face still, not giving Linda the satisfaction of a reaction. Tom's jaw tightened. Around them, some people gasped, while others exchanged uncomfortable glances. Linda's eyes flicked proudly across the courtroom. She didn't care who heard. To her, Maya was just a poor farmer's wife, someone easy to belittle. The judge raised his eyebrows but said nothing. He looked at Linda sharply, as if warning her to watch her words. The air grew heavier with tension. Everyone could feel it. This wasn't just about land or money anymore. It was about pride, respect, and something deeper. Maya's silence spoke louder than any reply. There was a quiet strength in her that no insult could break. The courtroom waited, holding its breath for what would come next. The judge tapped his gavel softly, signaling Linda to begin. She stood up with confidence, her voice clear and steady. "Your Honor," Linda began, "I am here because this couple has taken what is rightfully mine. My family has owned this land for generations. Years ago, I allowed Mr. and Mrs. Miller to use a small part of it as a favor, but they have crossed their boundaries. They have planted crops on my property without permission and have refused to pay rent or any compensation." She glanced at Maya and Tom with a cold smile. "Despite my repeated requests, they have ignored my warnings. This is not just about land, it's about respect for property and the law." Her lawyers stood beside her, nodding. Linda's words were polished, full of legal terms and firm accusations. She made it sound like she was the victim, the one being wronged. The judge listened quietly, his eyes fixed on her. The courtroom was silent except for her steady voice. Some people nodded, others frowned. Maya and Tom sat still, listening without interrupting. Linda finished and sat down, looking satisfied. She seemed sure she had won before the trial even started. But the judge didn't speak right away. He turned his gaze toward Maya, waiting for her side. The room seemed to hold its breath again, knowing the real test was about to begin. Linda's confident words had set the stage. Now it was time for the truth, and that truth was about to shake the courtroom. When the judge looked at Maya, she stood slowly, her hands trembling a little. The courtroom was still, everyone waiting to hear what she would say. Maya's voice was soft but clear. "Your Honor, I don't have fancy words or lawyers," she began, "but I have the truth." She took a deep breath and looked straight ahead. "The land Linda talks about was promised to us by her father." There was a quiet murmur among the crowd. "Years ago, when Linda's father was sick, my husband and I found him lying by the roadside during a storm," Maya said, her voice steadying with the memory. "We took him home, cared for him for weeks. He was kind and grateful. Before he passed, he told us the land was ours, as thanks for saving his life. He even gave us a paper to prove it, but it was lost when a flood came and destroyed our home." Maya's eyes scanned the room, filled with honesty and pain. "We have worked that land every day since. We planted every seed, watered every crop. We didn't take anything that wasn't given." She looked at Linda quietly. "It hurts to be called thieves when all we've done is work hard to live." The judge watched her closely. Some people in the courtroom whispered, others wiped tears from their eyes. Maya's words weren't polished or rehearsed, but they carried something stronger: truth and heart. Tom reached out and gently squeezed her hand. Maya nodded once, then sat down, her heart pounding. The judge cleared his throat and looked thoughtful. The story was no longer just about land, it was about trust, promises, and respect. And the courtroom waited, holding its breath for what would come next. 6. Flashback scene. The hidden history, 350 words. The courtroom seemed to fade away as the story drifted back to a rainy night, 10 years ago. Linda's father had been traveling along a muddy country road when suddenly he collapsed. The storm was fierce, lightning flashed, and the cold rain soaked everything. Tom and Maya were working nearby in their fields when they found him lying there, barely conscious. Without hesitation, they wrapped him in blankets and carried him to their small farmhouse. For weeks they cared for him, cooking, cleaning, and nursing him back to health. During that time, he told them stories of his family and the land he owned. He was kind and gentle, different from the cold woman he left behind. Before he died, he made a promise. He gave Tom and Maya a paper, a deed that said the land they were farming now belonged to them. "You saved my life," he had said. "This is yours now." But fate was cruel. Not long after his death, a flood swept through the town, destroying their home. The precious paper was lost in the water and mud. Still, many neighbors remembered the promise. They had seen the old man with Tom and Maya, heard the story. Back in the courtroom, the memory hung heavy in the air. The judge's eyes narrowed. The truth was buried deep, but not gone. Linda sat stiffly in her chair, her face pale. The story she wanted to forget was coming back, and it threatened everything she believed was hers. The courtroom waited. What was lost might soon be found again, and the balance of power was about to change. The judge leaned forward, resting his elbows on the bench. His voice was calm but carried weight. "Miss Smith," he said, looking directly at Linda, "were you present when your father was ill and cared for by Mr. and Mrs. Miller?" Linda hesitated, her eyes darted away. "And no, Your Honor. I was away in the city." The judge nodded slowly. "I see, you may not know this, but I once worked as a clerk in this very town. I remember your father well, a good man." The courtroom grew still. Linda's face tightened. "I also know Mr. and Mrs. Miller," the judge continued. "They were honest, hard-working people. I have heard from neighbors about the promise your father made before his passing." Linda's confident posture faltered. She glanced at her lawyers, who looked uneasy. The judge then addressed everyone. "This case is not just about land or contracts. It is about honor and promises made in good faith. Sometimes the law must listen to more than just papers." Linda's lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time she seemed unsure. The courtroom held its breath. The judge's words carried a clear message. The story Maya and Tom told was believed, and Linda's claims were weakening. The power in the room was shifting. The wealthy woman who once spoke with sharp words now sat silent. The judge's next words would decide everything, and no one would forget this moment. The judge looked at the room, his gaze steady and firm. After hearing both sides, and considering the testimonies and the history of this land, I have reached a decision. Linda's fingers clenched tightly on the bench. Maya and Tom held each other's hands, nervous but hopeful. The land in question rightfully belongs to Mr. and Mrs. Miller. While the original deed was lost, the promise made by Miss Smith's late father was known to many in this community. This court recognizes the strength of that promise and the years of honest work put in by the Millers. He turned to Linda. Furthermore, I must address the conduct displayed here today. Respect and dignity must be upheld, regardless of one's social standing. Mocking another's hard work and livelihood is unacceptable. A soft murmur of agreement spread through the courtroom. Linda's face flushed with shame. She looked down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The judge continued, "Let this serve as a reminder that justice is not always about money or power. It is about truth and fairness." With a final knock of his gavel, the court was adjourned. Maya and Tom exchanged a quiet glance, relief washing over them. The courtroom slowly emptied, but the weight of the moment stayed with everyone present. The victory was more than land, it was a lesson in respect and justice, and the wealthy woman who insulted a farmer's wife had been silenced by the judge's words. Outside the courthouse, the sun was setting low, casting a warm orange glow over the dusty town. Maya and Tom stood quietly on the steps, holding hands. No loud cheers or celebrations, just a deep, steady relief that settled over them like a soft blanket. Neighbors gathered slowly, offering hugs and kind words. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Maya looked up at the sky, a small, tired smile spreading across her face. She didn't need fancy clothes or applause. This was enough. Tom squeezed her hand gently, his eyes full of pride. "We did it," he said softly. Maya nodded. "It's more than just the land," she replied. "It's about being seen and respected." The judge's words echoed quietly in the air, reminders of kindness, honor and truth. The battle had been hard, but the truth had won. As the crowd began to disperse, Maya and Tom took one last look at the fields beyond. Their home was safe, and in that moment, the farmer's wife felt something strong inside her, hope. Because sometimes the quietest victories are the most powerful of all.